Hello and welcome to HealthCast 305, Miami and South Florida's #1 nutrition, health, and wellness podcast and talk show. I am your host, Dr. Rob Polzak of Physiologics Physical Therapy. And today we have a very exciting guest because we've had a lot of doctors on and PTs talking about the physical rehab, but a large portion of your health is also nutrition and diet. So today I'm honored to have Tony Castillo. He graduated from FIU right here in Miami, so he's a local. He knows all about it. With a master's in dietetics. Okay, good. Yeah, not Dianetics. That's something else. I always say that to you. It's like that's like that's some metaphysical stuff. His internship was at the University of Florida, and he worked with sports nutrition. So I'm sure that was a cool experience. Probably worked with a lot of
Amazing.
athletes.
Yeah.
And then, can you tell us a little bit about what you did after that internship?
Yeah. Well, first off, Rob, thanks so much for having me on here. I
Oh,
appreciate you. Uh, it's an honor, as always, to especially educate South Florida. Love the name of the podcast, HealthCast 305.
just came to me.
Being that I did school down in Miami, knowing how much cafecito runs through our blood and how important it is. I see you having coffee right now, so you
Yeah,
already
right.
know.
What perfect timing.
So awesome, man. Thank you. I love being here. So that's the first thing. Now, to talk a little bit about me and my journey, right? When I was younger, I had weight issues. I was bullied in high school for my weight, and I didn't really know what to do about it. I found a friend that was like a bodybuilder, and I'm like, hey, man, can you make me a meal plan? And he made me a meal plan. I started strength training. I lost the weight. I actually played football in high school, and I was one of the linemen freshman year, so a really big guy.
That's when you know
And
you're
if you
thick.
see me now, I'm no longer, if I was put in front of a lineman in NFL, I'd get knocked out right away. So after that, I went to college and I started drinking more. I still played like intramurals, but I gained the weight back, and I went back to find that meal plan, and I never really did. So I started to count calories, did low carb diets, did fasting, did everything that was popular at that time in college, and nothing really like happened. It didn't work for me, and I got my bachelor's in biology and chemistry, and both of those were great foundations for what happened next because I took a year off. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went to an open house with my wife at FIU, and one of the topics was nutrition. I was like, Master's in Nutrition? You can get a degree in this? No way. I thought you just had to go on Instagram and sell plans. That's all you needed to do.
Nowadays.
Well, little to my knowledge, I saw that there was a master's degree. So I went ahead and did that master's, and I absolutely loved it. I learned so much about the human body and about metabolism and how it's more than just follow this meal plan to be successful. And in Latin America, that's what a dietitian does. You go, you see them, they give you a meal plan, off your way. But now in the US, we've seen such a shift and known that these one-off meal plans don't work. A one-off session, imagine a one-off session with a PT. Rob, how successful would that patient be when they're doing rehab?
Yeah, not very well. You need to be able to take them through a plan of care.
Exactly, a plan of care. And that's where there's this big gap within what a dietitian does and what we see other nutrition coaches do. They just give macros, they just give a meal plan, and then that's it. But you need to have a plan of care to progress them through to ensure that they're taking the steps to get through their food journey and their nutrition journey. Now, once I finished my master's, I went to the University of Florida and I worked as a intern doing my sports nutrition career. And it was awesome working football, working soccer, working track, working all the Olympic sports, and working with athletes that were actually in the Olympics and athletes that were drafted into pro sports. From there, I went and worked in baseball. Being that I'm from Miami, both of my parents are Dominican, and I'm sure you know
Oh my
Dominicans are
God,
pretty big
yeah.
in baseball, right?
That's huge, yeah. That's like, yeah.
Yeah. So knowing Spanish and being able to translate some of the things I was learned in nutrition to performance and able to explain to some of these kids. And I say kids because some of these kids were 13 to 16 when I went to go visit them in the DR, and explaining how nutrition affected their performance and for them to understand and actually utilize it and come to me and say, hey, Tony, I actually felt a difference by implementing some of the things we've spoken about. Like that was a huge game changer for me because I was able to help them out. And some of these kids don't even know how to write in their own language because in the third grade, they're taken out of school to just play baseball.
That's
So
crazy.
for them to really understand how much nutrition impacts their performance as professionals was amazing. And the reason I got into sports and helping active individuals was because imagine if I could tell LeBron James, hey, eat more fruits and vegetables, and he goes out and says, hey, you know what helped me perform better? Eat more fruits and vegetables. The whole world would listen.
Yeah, that's
right.
true.
So these athletes have this bigger platform that one day this podcast will be at, Rob. So eventually when they go back through the archives of this, they'll hear this podcast. So it's just spreading the message as much as possible of how much nutrition can help people perform at their best, recover quickly, and fuel with purpose and on purpose, as I like to say.
Wow, so if you could work with athletes with sports nutrition, does that make working with the average person like a cakewalk? Or, I mean, are there their own set of challenges? Because I had the same experience with PT. It's like you can work with athletes and they can be tough, but then it doesn't necessarily mean that regular people are going to be any easier, even though they don't have as high of demands. Yeah,
so as you know, as you said, athletes have that high demand. When dealing with people that are still, they have that athlete mindset. And that's what I love about the people I work with, that they're very dedicated to their craft, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on what they do, they want to get better. Now, when we work with someone who's not as active, that's when it becomes a challenge, because we really have to go into what their why is. Why are you doing this? So, I want to lose the weight. Okay, why? So I can get quicker, but why do you want to get quicker? Well, I want to beat my marathon time, and why is that important to you? It's been a goal I've had my whole life. All right, well, now I want to work with you because now I see there's something behind that why than just losing 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why are you trying to do this? What's it going to get you? Because losing the weight is easy. I tell everyone, I can get anyone to lose the weight or gain the weight. The tough part is maintaining it, because that's where we all seem to fail. We all can get to a weight goal, and then all of a sudden we go back to what we were doing before. And that's why what I teach is behavior-based. It's more how we can get you to start doing these things so that when you get to that goal, you can maintain it and never have to see another dietitian again.
Yeah, so there's a big behavior component, it sounds like. And that's probably the least respected concept of anything. Like people probably just think they can just implement and be good, but it's not like that.
100%, man. You know it. You see it in your field, right? You see people like, I can do this. And they come to you once or twice and they're like, I can do this myself. It's like, you really can't. There's a reason why we go to school. There's a reason why you have a doctorate, right?
Yeah, right. We got to be able to bridge that gap. So speaking of discipline and keeping to diets, today we have 3 topics, and 2 of them are regarding particular diets that I think are big. They're big deals. I think that you probably can recognize these 2 as probably 2 of the biggest diets that some of your people want. They're your clients or your patients? Your clients' demand. And so those 2 are intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet. So we can start with intermittent fasting. I think we all have a little bit of a concept of what this is, but I'm not sure if people always implement it right or people know what the hell they're doing when they start it. And I feel like you probably get a lot of people coming to you asking you about this. So what exactly is intermittent fasting?
Yeah. Well, before even diving into that, what have you heard about intermittent fasting? What have your clients asking you about intermittent fasting?
I actually have a client that's a physician that does it, and he has an app for it, because there's an app for everything. And and he started off with something pretty simple. It was like he would eat from like 10 to 7 p.m., 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., which definitely seems doable. That's a pretty big window. That's like 14 hours. But he started shutting down the window of where he was eating. And so the idea you hear from most people, I feel like, is that intermittent fasting during the times you're not eating, like, burns fat only, and then when you can eat as much as you want in that period, which reduces overall calorie intake during the day. So now he's gotten to a point where he's done it for half the year. He's done it for like 180 days straight. He's lost a ton of weight. His belly's much smaller, and he's very proud of it. He's always like, look, and he always shows me his app, and he's down to like eating only 8 hours a day and fasting for the other 16. But sometimes I'm thinking like man, this is like the schedule of eating that like a college kid has. Like they skip breakfast and then they eat lunch and dinner. I'm like, how is that? But I guess it gets more elaborate, or maybe that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because I know a lot of doctors are telling patients I work with or clients I work with that they should do fasting or they should do keto. And this is where I challenge doctors, because when I was at Florida, I was lucky enough to talk to sports medicine doctors. And this is as much nutrition as they got. They got a 1-hour session with me throughout their whole career. I'm sorry, but 1 hour of anything is not enough to make anyone an expert or to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
The next thing is, because it worked for that doctor, they think it's going to work for everyone. Unfortunately, some of the clients I've worked with, their diet history is not great. I worked with a woman whose doctor recently just told her she needs to stop walking and start biking for an hour and start fasting, when he doesn't know her diet history. In the past year and a half that I've worked with her, she had missed her period for over 6 months because she was on such a low calorie diet for so long. And now he's telling her to go back to that. Like, this is where I challenge doctors to really think, stay in your lane. I believe there are doctors that know a lot about nutrition, but most of them that just give this blanket because they heard it on the news really need to stay in their lane. And just because it worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. So that's the first piece of information I want to start with. The second is, intermittent fasting isn't really a diet. It's just timing constraints. Mm-hmm. So the history of it, let's go back to Hippocrates back in
oh my God,
in the old days, right? He used to say, when you're sick, you shouldn't feed it. So they used to think that fasting is what helped people cure them from being sick, right? And then we know it has a lot of religious implications. If we go to Muslims and Ramadan, so working with athletes that are in the NFL, they practice Ramadan, getting right into it. So fasting is part of what we have to work with as sports nutritionists and sports dietitians. And then there's a difference between fasting and starving. So going into all that, like, we know that there's a history of fasting that's been around for thousands of years, right? So it's kind of like, what is the purpose that you're doing fasting, and will it be sustainable? That's where I always question people, because to go to your doctor, he's been successful for 6 months, but what's going to happen in the next 6 months? What's going to happen in the next 6 years? What's going to happen in the next 60 years if God willing, he continues to live? Like, is he going to be able to fast all the time? I can't answer that question. And then we always go into these vacation modes, right? Oh, I went on vacation, I stopped fasting. Well, then is it really sustainable? Are you really doing what's right for you? So for fasting, just kind of getting back into it, a lot of people do it because of fat loss, right? What we know works for fat loss is calories in versus calories out, right? Even when we go into the ketogenic diet, if you're eating above your calories, you're not going to lose weight. The same thing with fasting. And one of the main challenges I've seen with fasting, not only personally, but with a lot of my clients, is that they may skip breakfast, but then that nighttime, they tend to be hungry or they tend to overeat. They tend to repeat calories that they missed out at breakfast throughout the day.
Okay.
So I always challenge them, if this is something you're going to do and you're going to do long term, I will support you as long as you fit those calories in and you don't starve yourself or feel hungry. Now, another mechanism we talk about when it comes to sports and going a little bit more into science is called mTOR. And that mTOR is what turns on the muscle building switch.
Yeah.
When we talk about protein distribution, we'll talk about that. But what we know from research is that that switch is turned on every 3 to 4 hours. And what turns on that muscle building switch is protein. So if you're going on a fast, you're actually losing a period to gain muscle mass. So you might be losing weight, but you might also be losing fat and muscle, which is a big discrepancy.
Yeah, I mean, he would do his workout following his longest part of the fast. Obviously, it's only a fast, but like if he's on hour 14 to 16 of his fast, and he would do his morning workout, he would get dizzy, which I'm sure the implications of being that weak is worse than even the mTOR pathway even starting, right? So, so he would have to stop the workout and such, but he's gotten better at it. I think he's gotten used to it. But yeah, that seems massive. I mean, if these people are trying to do a diet and they're trying to improve their physique and they don't have the energy or they can't get the mTOR pathway kicked off, then that was no good.
Yeah, you're wasting your time during a workout, right? Because I never like to tell my clients you should be working out to lose fat. You should be working out because you enjoy it and you're trying to increase your performance. So if you're going in, it's like driving a car without gas. You're not going to get very far during your performance.
Yeah.
So why even do that? And as you mentioned, there's a bunch of different methods, right? So there's the 5-2, there's the eat, stop, eat, there's the 16-8. So really breaking those down, the 16-8, which is the most popular one, is where you fast for 16 hours and you eat for 8 hours. The eat, stop, eat is you fast for 24 hours once or twice a week. The 5-2 is you eat 500. Yeah, imagine that. You eat 500 to 600 calories on 2 non-consecutive days of the week and eat normally the other 5. So when we look at that, that's still going back to a calorie deficit, right?
Yeah.
It
all comes down.
Yeah.
It comes back to that every time. It sounds like it is the calories in, calories out. And that's how I would articulate that to my patients casually when they mention this stuff, that it seems like all these diets, any diet, is just a way to achieve a calorie deficit, and there's just different ways to go about it. If you want to eat like a pig and have fun when you're eating, and maybe intermittent fasting's for you. But that's
Yeah,
my opinion. So it sounds.
absolutely.
Is there any kind of hormonal effects that this intermittent fasting has? Because I've read about certain, like, you always hear about hormonal effects. Like you hear things like, oh, this increases belly fat, which those are the weird ads you see on the side of the website. You go, don't eat this fruit.
Yeah.
Are there hormonal effects with IF here?
Yeah, so when it comes to IF, we always hear like insulin, HGH, some of the things we had spoken about previously, like cell repair, fat burning, aging, brain health,
Mm-hmm.
inflammation, all these things. So let's kind of break those
Yeah.
down one by one. So HGH is human growth hormone. Typically, the one thing, so I was invited down to Peru a few years ago to talk to their Olympic athletes.
Well.
And one of the things I said to them is, all right, I'm about to tell you the biggest performance enhancing drug that is legal that is out there. And everyone stopped and they're like, all right, what's this guy going to say?
And they lean forward.
And, oh, yeah, they leaned in. They're like, all right, they might have been sleeping the whole presentation.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
They finally got right into it. And they're like, what's he going to say? And I went to the next slide and it was sleep. And they're like, sleep? What's this guy talking about?
Bummer.
Well, when we go right into sleep, that first stage of deep sleep, we release the most HGH, which is human growth hormone, which helps our muscles increase and recover and repair. The same with our bones. So why am I bringing that up with IF is because IF, on some studies with population, and that's the challenge with IF, is that most of these studies are done with maybe under 30 people, if they're lucky, maybe up to 50 max, but again, it's very few and for a very short amount of time. So what I always tell my clients is, if you're going to do this, we want to do this for a short amount of time. This isn't going to be something you do long term. So the short-term effect, and this was a study done with 34 people, and it was done for about a week. They found that they actually did increase their HGH, or their human growth hormone. Now, is this sustainable? I don't know, because I go back to what happens when we start to fast. Our body's starting to prepare for what could be starvation. So maybe it's like, all right, this might be fight or flight mode, so I might need to actually start producing more HGH because I need to start being repaired because I don't know what's about to come.
Yeah.
Because right now, Rob isn't feeding my body, right? I'm not feeding my body, just pretending if you were doing it. So why is it causing that? And that's what we're trying to figure out. What's the long-term effect on it, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is the cell repair or cell autophagy. So eating and getting rid of old cells that haven't really done anything. Again, IF has shown to help with that. But again, the population, N equaling how many people they do in the study, is very small. They haven't done thousands and thousands of people, 100,000. There's 7 billion people on this planet. If you did 34 over 7 billion, you're going to get a very small chance of being like, that's not statistically significant. And most of the studies done so on aging and brain health, which shows that it can help build new nerve cells or may help live longer if you do every other day fast, was done in rats. So I know we use rats as a preliminary model, but it hasn't been shown in human models. So all these things that they're publishing that we see in the media has been done on rats or very small populations. And I don't feel comfortable suggesting that unless we had more data. And I would be, to put it bluntly, be stupid not to look at the data, but I'd also be stupid to just take it at face value, right?
Yeah.
Like really having to understand what all this means and the implication means, because when we think about active individuals, a lot of them have had binge eating and they don't even know it. So putting them on an intermittent fasting might be setting them up for failure as opposed to success, because they might see that food and they might get triggered down a longer line of eating disordered paths and actually helping them move forward with what their true goal and performance is.
Yeah, you got to believe if they stop intermittent fasting at some point, then they binge every time they eat, and they add an extra meal where they're binging. It's not going to be a good experience for anyone. So, and does it line up with people's normal lifestyles? If you are hanging out with buddies for a weekend and you all get breakfast, like, are you just not going to eat? So I feel like the best thing to do when you're thinking of a diet seems to be something sustainable that you actually enjoy. Are there any certain pathological populations? So, for example, we all know that, people with autoimmune diseases or diabetes or things like that, sometimes they need particular diets. Is there any considerations with intermittent fasting and those populations, or is there anything that you'll see in certain patients that you're like, this person needs intermittent fasting because they have XYZ?
The only time I see that is if like someone's gut isn't working. So with things like IBS,
Okay.
Crohn's, there has been some clients that I've worked with that found it works better when they eat only during certain times because it doesn't cause that trigger effect or having them run to the bathroom because they're nauseous or they have to do number two, right? They have diarrhea, for lack of better wording. That's the medical term. Don't hate on me, folks. But they might have better gut rest if they have those things. But then it's like doing it for a short period of time, then figuring out what are those trigger foods so they continue to eat the way that they need to, right? So again, using it as a very short-term manipulation and then trying to figure out what's the cause of all these challenges instead of relying on it as the only tool to have. So I use it as a tool in my toolbox, but it's not the first tool I bring out, and there's no real population that I would say 100% this would work for them.
Okay, cool. And so it sounds like you really keep all your options open when prescribing these different types of diets and basically just like I would with exercise. Like you're incorporating them as needed based on your knowledge, and there's a range of them.
One thing, so this was from a sports dietitian out of Australia. She said, if you show me a diet that's going to help my athletes perform better, I'll do it. And that's the way I look at it for all my patients. If there's something out there that's going to help my clients get to their goal quicker and perform at their best, I'm more than happy to adopt it. However, show me that it's going to do that and not cause other issues. Because I have some clients that do very well on IF. They love it. It fits their lifestyle. When they go on vacations, they continue to do it. Now I have others that if I even mention IF, they get triggered into a binge eating episode. So really understanding where they are. And going back to an athlete or a population, like think about it, Rob, like if it's someone who's training in the morning, like you said, and they don't eat anything until 2 p.m, they're just not even helping their own recovery, and they could get injured and then not be the best person they can be.
Yeah, right. You want to make sure the gas tank is filled up there. Exactly. And so now speaking of, I guess fad diets, that might be a bad way to put it.
No, it's a great way to put it.
The second one that I wanted to talk about was ketogenic diet. I have a buddy that actually has a ketogenic cooking channel on YouTube. He's got like 50,000 followers, and those people, they eat like gods. No carbs, but they eat like gods, like bacon for breakfast. Some people have dirty keto diets where they just eat all the fat and protein they want. So what is the ketogenic diet, and what is ketosis? That's the big one.
Yeah. Well, before even hopping into that, let's start like last time. What have you heard from your
patients? I was going to say, is he going to ask this? I was excited. I was like, I want to answer now. Yeah, well, I guess I've had a couple patients that have tried it, and they seem to do a lot of YouTube research. They do. They're like YouTube experts. They're like YouTube doctors. Yeah. And they, like I said, they have a lot of interesting foods that they'll make, and some of them sound pretty dirty, the meals that they'll make. But in general, if they do stick with it, they seem to enjoy it. But a lot of the times there's issues with there'll be like a little snack at the clinic and they can't eat it. So that's kind of funny to me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely low carb. That they always want to go and explain to you the process of creating ketones and how they're entering it, and they'll have apps as well. It's like an exciting thing for them. But it seems to me that I think keto might be. I think people hold on to keto better than they do intermittent fasting. I don't know. That could be totally wrong. You have more experience, but it seems like people are like, yeah, I've been doing keto for like a year and I love it. So, but I can't imagine that's easy for them when they go out to eat in restaurants. That's a big problem they also talk about is like they can't really eat like normal. They're getting they're replacing everything on the menu. Can I get like this but with no that? And can I get a burger with no bun? So it seems like something that's moderately hard to do, but they're excited about it and they like to eat. They like to go for their little dirty cheat meals because they're all carb free, I guess.
So, Rob, just what you said, man, like that to me says that it's not going to be long term. They say they love it, but they don't because they have to change the way they eat. Now, if it's someone, so keto, going back to that question you asked at the end, was made for people that have epilepsy, so neural disorders. And honestly, yes, I would give it to someone who had epilepsy because that's why it was created, right? And there's a performance institute here in Tampa where they're very big on keto, and they did N equals 1, so population was one person, a study who had Parkinson's, and he started to do keto, and it actually helped relieve some of his Parkinson's, like the shakes, right?
Tremors, yeah.
Yeah, and the tremors, and that was pretty cool. But again, n equals 1. How do we extrapolate that population to many? So again, I thought that was super cool to see. Like, they had a video from one day to the next, so they were able to get him into ketosis quickly. But what is keto, right? So it's a moderate protein, low carbohydrate, high fat diet, and I think this is where most people fail on the ketogenic diet. The moderate protein.
I was gonna say, yeah, that doesn't seem like what I've heard.
Moderate protein. And here's the reason why, Rob. So actually, how do your clients test that they're in ketosis?
Yeah, that's not good. It's just winging it. I think I had one person that had, like, there was some sort of testing procedure, like a strip. Is that right? Like they would pee?
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's three popular ways to do it. One is through your breath, one is through your urine, and then one is your blood. Your breath and your urine are not as reliable because that's when your body's excreting the ketones. So it's already been used. See you later, buddy. Like, get out of here. So we don't really know what your levels are. The best and most accurate would be the blood, because then you see how many ketones you actually have in your blood.
Oh.
So again, it's like being a diabetic. If you know any diabetics, they get used to it, but it's not fun, right?
Yeah.
It's time to get used to.
The prick.
Yep, the finger pricks, and you have to find different areas to do it, and every day, right? So I've actually worn a continuous glucose monitor to monitor my insulin levels and blood sugar levels, but that's a whole nother conversation. But anyways, back to the keto and ketogenic diet. So going back to the moderate protein, most people fail here. It's not the carbs, it's the protein. What happens is our bodies have been around for thousands of years, ladies and gentlemen, and unfortunately for us, well, fortunately for us, but unfortunately for all these keto zealots, there's something called gluconeogenesis. Gluco meaning carb, neo meaning new, genesis meaning creation of. So creation of a new carb.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two ways to explain this, and we're going to start with the first one. I know we live in Miami. It's very hot here, but I want you to imagine we are in New York, and it's snowing outside. And we have a fireplace. So we take the logs next to the fireplace, and we throw in the fireplace to keep it hot, right?
Yep.
Okay. What happens when we run out of the fire logs and there's a snowstorm outside?
Oh God.
And the house starts to cool down. What do?
Throw more logs on?
Well, let's say you run out of logs.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Whoops. Then you're screwed. You got to start.
You're screwed. Breaking down the house.
I was gonna say you got to break down the couch and throw it in there.
Yeah.
You got to find a way.
Yeah, you got to find a way. So let's just say you have to go against the walls of the house.
Yeah.
You start breaking the walls of the house and throw in the fire pit. Well, that's kind of useless, right? Because now you just left a big open hole for the cold air to come in. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what happens. So the fire logs are the carbs. And what happens is when we stop eating carbohydrates, we start to find new ways to create fuel for our body, because glucose is our body's preferred source of energy. Glucose comes from carbohydrates. So those are the fire logs next to the fire pit. Now, when the snowstorm's out, we start going against the wall, and the wall is our muscles. So we start actually using our muscles, which is where carbohydrates are stored, to fuel our body. So all these people that are doing keto, they could, and most likely, are converting that protein that they're eating to use as a carbohydrate source, or they're using their muscles to fuel their body.
Oh, gosh.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, our bodies are so smart. We can only store carbohydrates in two places, Rob. That is the liver and the muscles, right? Only two places in our body we can store carbs. That's it. I would say less than 1% is stored as fat. Okay, we'll say 3 places, but I like to just use the 2 as the analogy. So imagine you have a fridge in your house and you have a fridge that's a mile away. You just finished a workout, you go home, you empty out the fridge. The next day, you didn't get groceries, you come home and you go to empty out the fridge, and there's nothing in there. So you have to walk to the fridge that's a mile away. That seems stupid and inefficient, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so the muscles is the fridge in your house. The fridge that's a mile away is your liver. So when we stop eating carbs, we start going after our liver, which is the powerhouse of our body, which isn't a good idea. So now all these people that are doing the ketogenic diet aren't properly fueling their body for performance, nor for their body to be running at its best. So again, I've seen the studies on keto, and it's by Volek, and he wrote a book about it, and he shows that endurance athletes do better on the ketogenic diet. However, the population is like N8, N16. And when you actually look at it, like pound for pound, as they say, carbohydrates still reign king, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of it, the ketogenic diet, I would not suggest unless you're epileptic or you're someone who really enjoys it. But I just had a client yesterday tell me she had a friend that had been doing keto for 2 months, and this past weekend she did some damage. She went out and she had pancakes, she had bread, and it's just like, yeah, and it's just like, then why are you doing it, right? So going back to that initial question, why are we going down this road, right? If it's just for weight loss, you can lose weight by eating carbs. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I did low carb, I do keto, and I lose like 10 pounds within the first week. And we're going to talk about the keto flu in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason you lose this weight is because hydrate water. So when you eat carbs, you hold on to water. Fats are hydrophobic or scared of water. So what happens is when you eat a higher fat diet, lower carbohydrates, you're just pushing water out. So actually a lot of people that are on the ketogenic diet have an imbalance of electrolytes, and they're typically dehydrated. So none of those sounds good for performance nor for living, regardless of what we do. And yes, it looks like you've lost weight on the scale, but you've lost water weight, not true fat mass. It even looks back to what you were doing before.
It probably even looks good in the mirror, right? I mean, if you're losing, you're probably filling out some of those gaps. So people they're eating high fat, and I think a lot of times people think it's also really high protein, but it's not really high protein. It's mainly high fat. Is there considerations for like? Yeah, what was that? Oh, no, I was gonna say, is there considerations for cholesterol? Because now, if we're talking, and I've heard some things, honestly, in my limited diet nutritional knowledge, I'm gonna admit that I've heard that dietary cholesterol oftentimes doesn't really affect your body's profile of cholesterol. So I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but when you see everyone hopping on the keto train, and maybe they shouldn't be, are there issues with cholesterol in their bloodstreams?
So what you said is absolutely correct. It's dietary is not the same as what's going on in your body. Now, there are ways to increase your HDL, which is what people deem as the good cholesterol, through diet, and there's ways to decrease your LDL through diet. But in the long term, what you really want to focus on is increasing your and your fiber intake. But when you see someone go on keto, some of them, their markers get better, but that's because they've lost weight, because they're in a calorie deficit, not because keto. So again, we don't know enough in regards to cholesterol to say you probably shouldn't do it. So, and I'm glad you said that in your limited knowledge, because I have limited knowledge when it comes to being a physical therapist. And I would never give anyone an exercise plan or a rehab plan or help them with physical therapy, because I know nothing about it. And that's a good thing about being experts in our fields. We know when to kind of hand off to someone else. But you are 100% correct that dietary does not have any link to what's going on in our body.
Is that 100% of the time, or do some people respond to their cholesterol more, where like if they eat cholesterol, they actually will increase their LDL levels?
I would never say 100% of the time, because we know everything's individualized.
I know.
There's definitely people out there. Yeah.
Gotcha.
If you ever hear anyone say 100% of the time, I would probably not trust them, because
I know, right?
There's literally never a time where it's always 100% of the time, at least that I know of.
Yeah, everything is up for interpretation at that point. Absolutely. So you were mentioning the keto flu earlier. What's that all about?
Oh man, let's talk about this. We're going to start a diet where you're going to feel like crap for a week. You're going to feel nauseous. You're going to feel sick.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound fun to me personally. No. I don't know about you, Rob. How about you? Does that sound fun?
I don't always enjoy that. I don't torture myself. Some people are into that stuff. I don't know. Not me.
Yeah. So things that you can get are nausea, stomach cramps, constipation, irritability.
Oh my gosh.
Trouble sleeping, sugar cravings, poor concentration, and muscle cramps. So if you're someone who's an active individual, or someone who's even trying to go through rehab, none of that sounds helpful for what our goal is at the end of the day, right? So to me, it always blows my mind, like why someone would put their body through a keto flu to lose the weight when there's so many other approaches that could help them in the long term. And I don't want to feel like flu-like symptoms, especially now during COVID. Heck, it's the least amount of time I want to, because maybe I go get a test and they have to stick the thing up my nose.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah.
You give yourself, you're gonna feel like you have COVID from this.
Yeah, and the reason is because we're not fueling our body. We're telling our body to use a different fuel source. So a great image for someone who's thinking about keto is, so when we talk to people about how we use carbohydrates, we think of a car and a fuel tank, right?
Mm-hmm.
You use the fuel that's in your tank. Now, when we think about keto, think of a 16-wheeler that's pulling a gas tank, right? So a gas, like, let's think of Shell. No, we're not sponsored by Shell, but think of Shell. They have their truck driver, and they have the gas that's coming to you. So what happens is, instead of the truck using the gas in the truck, it pulls a gas container in the back, okay? And that's the fuel it starts to utilize. So people think, oh, well, if it's going to use the fat that's around my stomach, my arms, my butt, my legs, then I'm going to look great. Unfortunately, if you're not in a calorie deficit, it's not going to pull from those areas. It's going to just keep it consistent. So it's just teaching your body to stop using the fuel from your car, but from the gas tank you have in the back. But if you aren't in a calorie deficit, you're just going to keep maintaining where you are at.
Oh, okay. So the idea seems pretty attractive if it works out. If you had a calorie deficit and you were on keto, I'm assuming this is what the concept of ketones comes from, is like it's creating energy from a non-carbohydrate source, but you have to be in a caloric deficit. So if you're not there, then you are just spinning your wheels. Okay.
And if you just said it's a caloric deficit, so you don't even need to go into, it has nothing to do with ketosis, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah,
you said caloric deficit, and I'm agreeing with you.
Who's that idiot?
Yeah, no, but that's it, just caloric deficit, right?
Yeah.
The way they paint the picture, most people end at a certain point, but at the end of the day, it's just that caloric deficit, because you will not use that fuel until you go into a caloric deficit.
So the whole ketone, sorry, I'm all excited now. The whole ketone thing is it's a little overplayed potentially. It's not like, oh, all of your benefits are coming from this special moment you're in called ketosis. But really, it's about the caloric deficit itself. Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people think they take these supplements that are going to put them into ketosis quicker. The research on it is still out, and you would need to get the blood tests on it, right? Mm-hmm. And again, if you have to supplement your diet, what are you doing? You should be just eating food first, regardless of anything. And really, you're telling your body to stop using glucose and start using ketones, which we start doing naturally if we are starving on an island, right? Like, and our body starts doing that. And that's not, if you want to put your body in constant starvation mode, I mean, go for it, have fun, but it's not really what we want to do.
Yeah, that wouldn't be optimal. I mean, most people are trying to look good, and honestly, this is something I always think about, is like for bodybuilders or physique athletes, you're not trying to look like you're starving. You're trying to, that look is very unnatural. And you have to eat in excess sometimes, and you have to eat strategically. It can't just be like, well, let's just put my body into like this old school starvation mode all the time, and it's gonna all like work out where I have like capped deltoids and like big biceps. Like, I don't think it works like that. Like, you have to be a little bit in excess, or maybe not calorically, but you have to eat in a way that's not encouraging this starvation mode that I always hear about in all diets. Like, it puts you in a starvation mode, which is where all the stuff happens. And I'm like, really? That's a thing?
No. And just going back to the amount of protein we were talking about, there's actually a bodybuilder that another dietitian I know was working with, and he was only eating 80 grams of protein a day, because that's how much protein he needed to hit that threshold. And he was barely eating any carbohydrates, but a ton of fat. He was able to do it. Again, it's really understanding that you can't be having a high amount of protein, because it's going to kick you back into gluconeogenesis, and you're going to use glucose as your fuel again, as opposed to using ketones. I think that's the big misconception.
Well, so since you brought it up, we're going to talk about it. So protein. So with any diet, you gotta be aware of your protein consumption. Even people not on diets have to be aware of their protein consumption. And this is always a debate. Personally, since you keep asking me what my experience is, I'm just going to tell you before I start.
Come on. I wanted to ask a question.
Actually, Rob, let's throw it back to you. No, yeah. I'm going to throw it back to myself. So what I know about protein consumption and my general recommendations to people who have no clue at all when I'm giving them would be like, shooting for 1 gram of protein per pound is a thing. But for a lot of people, that's tough. If you have like an 82-year-old patient who has a diet of like that's heavy in carbohydrates, like telling them like, well, now you got to eat 160 grams of protein tomorrow. That's like, to them, that'd be like me eating like 16 steaks in one day. It's just as difficult. So I understand the challenge, and some of these recommendations are based off of pounds, some are based off of weight in the metric system of kilograms.
Kilos.
I forgot about that.
You're good, man.
So I know this is a broad-ranging question, but for your average patient, do you have a typical recommendation in terms of protein intake? And if so, what would that be?
So I like to keep it simple because I think numbers confuse people and it doesn't help set them up for success. So what I do is I say you want to get about a palm of protein, not counting your fingertips, same width, same size as your palm, right, of protein per every 3 to 4 hours, because that's what's going to keep that mTOR pathway or that muscle building switch on. So if we really wanted to look at numbers, when we look at that 2.2 grams per kilo, which is 1 gram per pound, that's going to be for bodybuilders. That's like the higher end. And then we also have to take into consideration, I've worked with vegans and vegetarians, having that amount of protein, you're going to have to eat a lot more carbs and a lot more fat, and that might not lead into what they're looking to do. Because if we think about protein sources for vegetarians, we have tofu, we have peanuts, so there's going to be higher fat, higher carbs, right?
Not as lean.
So how do you work around? For women, it's like 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilo. For men, I look at 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilo. I have put people up to 2.2, but again, that 2.2 is more for bodybuilders. And that's what's been shown to help with keeping the muscle preservation. But even resistance trained individuals that have actively been training, they don't need that much protein. And what the main thing they actually need is probably more carbohydrates to keep them fueled. And as we know, carbohydrates are the one thing that most people feel. But when it comes to protein, I think that palm of protein every 3 to 4 hours, or about 1.2 to 1.6 for women, and then 1.4 to 1.8 for men, grams per kilo.
So for guys, it goes from about 1 gram of protein per pound to about 0.65 to 0.8. That's like the range when you transfer that over to kilos. I think I did that right. But yeah, so that's interesting. So you base some of your recommendations off the kilos, which shows that you're an OG. You're one of these dudes that you base your research off like the European model that's like been around a little bit longer than America. I like that. Yeah. All right, that's good. So is there ever too much protein? I mean, we hear about kidney damage, but from what I know, it's like you have to have kidney issues before, and you have to be consuming protein in excess of like 4 grams per pound like a day for a long time. But that's just one study I read a while ago. I haven't done a lot of research following up, but is there too much protein? Because I work out in a gym with a bunch of really strong jacked bros and females, and you know how that goes. And I feel like people sometimes are just drinking right out of the bucket of protein. So is there ever too much for someone that's starting out or someone that's really into fitness?
So, as you said, the research has shown that if you are a healthy individual, at the moment, there is no upper limit that we've seen. For regards like that 4.4, the study that they did, I know it was like 4.4 grams, so double what is recommended even for bodybuilders, and they had no adverse effects after a 3-month period, I believe.
Okay.
Now,
so for me, that would be 400 grams of protein a day, which is insane to think. Because I'm 200 pounds. Yeah, so that would be...
That sounds like a lot of protein. Yeah. And honestly, Rob, I don't recommend that. So again, the tolerable upper limit of what we see with protein is what's going to happen is most people are going to get... I'm sure you've had this, and sorry for the terminology, but protein farts or the protein poops. Like, you're just going to be going to the bathroom a lot and having like loose stools because you're not giving your body... So what do I see? I'd say there probably is an upper limit because of how your bowels are affected. But because of research, I can't say like, all right, this is like, I haven't seen anything that says like, all right, this is way too much. But I wouldn't suggest it because then you're going to have a lot of loose stools, and we try to avoid that.
Yeah, that seems when it starts changing your poop, that's when you know things are getting that's when you know things are getting out of control, when like your body just can't help but like create this issue with your stool. So that's no good.
Yeah,
Um
something's not right here.
yeah, right? And like you were saying
Yeah.
with vegans and plant-based diets, it's got to be hard. You know, we see these memes of people comparing like the weight of steak versus the weight of broccoli and saying like, well, broccoli's more dense with protein. But, you know, it just looks like one of these things where it's like you'd have to eat like 60, you'd have to eat like a huge container of broccoli because it's not heavy, but it's hard to get. So when you have your vegan or vegetarian clients, are there issues with them getting the amount of protein they need? It sounds like there might be. And do they have to mix up the sources of protein? Because I know there's some amino acids that are very important, the essential amino acids that you have to get. I think with the mTOR pathway, the big one that I remember learning about was the leucine. Leucine is the
Correct,
one that
100%.
kicks it off, right? And so it's
Yep.
easier to get that with meat. So are you dialing in with these vegans and vegetarians in terms of what they need to eat for protein?
When it comes to vegans and vegetarians, I always tell them, if this is the route you want to go, I'm more than happy to support you. But I do want you to know you need to be very good at planning and very good at routines. Because if we're looking to keep that muscle building switch on every 3 to 4 hours and having the right amount of leucine, then you need to be very in tune with your diet and have it ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because with more animal-based products, you don't have to worry as much because you can milk anywhere. You can pick up deli meat anywhere. You can pick up cheese anywhere, right? Like just spitballing some animal proteins.
Yeah.
Very, very easy. But when it comes to plant-based proteins, the amount of leucine that's in it is very low. So you need to eat a lot of plant-based protein in order to get more leucine to turn on that muscle building switch. And as you said, there's 9 essential amino acids and 11 that are non-essential. So that means 9 you need to get from food, 11 your body makes. Out of those 9, leucine is the most important one, but you do need all 9 in order for it to kind of turn on that mTOR switch.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to vegans and vegetarians, it's about making sure they have those complementary proteins, but also thinking that they have that leucine that will give them enough to turn on that muscle building switch.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So, like something like tofu, that doesn't have all 9 essentials, does it?
I believe it does.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think tofu and quinoa are 2 that are complete. But the rest they're.
Yeah, right. And then quinoa, you gotta take into account that there's carbs in there, so then you gotta work with that too. So these these clients really make you earn your money. It sounds like they're like,
I've dealt with it, so it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's nothing compared to some of the populations you get, like in terms of pathologies, like stuff like that too. So what is this? This is an interesting question. I've seen you with milk. What's this milk situation? You love promoting milk, and I love milk too. Do you think milk is like the secret in terms of getting the protein you need and nutrition?
Well, I think it's a great post-workout. I love chocolate milk, and when I tell my clients I can have chocolate milk post-workout, they're like, "What?" And it's just like, it's just bringing you back to like childhood. It just tastes so good. It's got carbs, it's got protein, and when it comes to recovery, I think about 3 things: refuel, repair, rehydrate. So refuel with carbs, repair with protein, rehydrate, and chocolate milk has all 3 of those. So I think that's just like an easy winner.
Yeah. It's a great recommendation, honestly. It's I get this stuff Fairlife. It's and Winn-Dixie.
Yeah, dude, that is
so
liquid
good.
gold.
It's like I wake up in the middle of the night and I drink it in my sleep. Literally last night I drank that in my sleep, and I was very disappointed in myself. But I'm like, you know what? It's better. It's like 1 or 2%, and you can make protein shakes in the blender with it, and it tastes like liquid gold is a funny way to put it. It's like so smooth and it's great. And milk is a great combination of those things you were saying, of rebuilding and carbohydrates. So that always seems like a good recommendation too. So
at the University of Tennessee, I was lucky enough to see their fueling stations, and they had something that they called liquid gold, and it was full fat chocolate milk, because you typically don't see whole chocolate milk. And that's for like the football players that had trouble keeping weight on. Dude, I got one and I tried it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is delicious. Obviously, it's dangerous, but it's very good.
It's dangerous because it's so calorie dense, correct?
Calorie dense,
yeah.
yeah.
And these guys are drinking it after practice, after a weightlifting session. Yeah, yeah. With that kind of milk, you could probably not even have to drink a protein shake afterwards. That takes care of your whole diet. So before we go here, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
What is like your typical patient? Like if you were here today speaking to a typical patient, who would that person be? Who do you deal with the most often?
Definitely like an active individual. So someone who works out at least 3 to 4 times a week, someone who's coachable, and someone who's ready to learn. Because what I've noticed is that, just like you said, a lot of people are these Google Docs or YouTube Docs, and they think they know everything about nutrition. But when they come through my program, they really learn how to fuel their body and why we eat certain foods and the purpose of it. And I love working with people that are ready to learn, not people that come saying like, I know everything. Because I've had clients that are like, all right, I know everything. I'm like, perfect. Then you tell me about recovery. And, they know some things, but they don't know everything. And that's why I'm an expert, right?
Yeah.
Just like I wouldn't take my car to a mechanic and be like, hey, I need you to fix this, this, and this. To be like, then why are you here? Why don't you just do it?
Yeah, when people come in kind of knowing what they want you to do for them, there is a process of us having to break that down and be like, we might have to look at other things too. So I can definitely see, and that's where our expertise comes in.
Yeah, a lot of clients come in, hey, I just want to lose weight and I want to do keto. All right, well, what's your past diet history, right? What have you done? How are you currently working out? What are your plans after we finish working together? Like, there's so many factors that come into play. Like, all right, they might have family members, right? How are you going to eat with them? Are you going to have separate meals? How are you going to have your weekends? Like, there's just so many things that come into play that people don't think about. They just think a Google search, a meal plan that lasts for 7 days is what they need, but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question. What are your, like, if you had to give a recommendation to the people listening to this show, what's like the typical recommendation that you might give to a client? I know this is so vague, but if you had to give any kind of take-home points to someone listening, like, this is what I usually see in terms of deficits or dietary issues, and I know that you need to consult with them and all that, but what's a tip? What's a basic piece of advice that you could give to the average person who might be seeking a dietitian or nutritionist?
A piece of advice like why they should see us, or
like the most
because
common
they wanna lose
problems you
weight.
see amongst people. Like, for example, like with me, I see a lot of people that would benefit just from doing some basic exercise. Just like walking, for example, just staying active, especially in the older population. Is there any kind of basic recommendations for the average person? I know it's so vague. You can even just pick one and be like, hey, if you're X, then yeah.
There's 2 things I always recommend, and one of them, here's the first one: hydrate or dihydrate.
Oh,
all right,
nice. Cool. We're both doing it.
There it is: hydrate or dihydrate.
Yeah,
So
there we go.
people tend to think they drink enough water a day. Just a blanket statement I like to give: do half your body weight in ounces. That's what you should do. And then for when you work out, you can weigh yourself before and after you work out, not to see how much weight you've lost, in a sense like I've lost fat, but for every pound you lose, you need to drink between 16 to 24 ounces to replenish the weight you've lost. So a lot of people might work out, and I've had this happen, and I had one person lose 10 pounds in a workout.
Oh my
They
God.
had to drink between 160 to 240 ounces. For those out there that aren't quick at math, that's over a gallon to 2 gallons of water that they had to drink in order to rehydrate for their next session. And some people will be like, oh my God, I love to see the scale go down by 10 pounds. You don't, because you're dehydrated.
Yeah.
And if you're dehydrated, you have a higher risk of injury, and your concentration and your performance actually goes down by 7 to 10%. So quick tip, just hydrate or dihydrate. And I know it's something like most people are like, oh no, I definitely drink enough water. I challenge you to think about how much water you actually drink in a day. And if you're drinking half your body weight in ounces, and if you're not, how much are you drinking? And then how can you increase it every week? Don't try to go from like 2 bottles of water a day to maybe 6, right? Go from 2 to 3, then 3 to 4, then 4 to 5, and 5 to 6. And that should take 4 weeks as that progression. And the other tip I can give is more fruits and vegetables, man. I think it's like every dietitian's outplayed album, like more fruits and vegetables, whatever your goal is. Like, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to increase your performance, like increase those fruits and vegetables, and that's going to help tremendously because it's got the fiber, it's got the vitamins and minerals. They're amazing. So
Yeah. That's that seems to be something that would go across all bounds, is just eating healthier options, because you fill your body up with things like that, so then you don't want to eat maybe that Snickers bar later or something like that. So that makes total sense that you would recommend those things. So can you tell me a little bit about your business? I found you online when I was looking for someone to work alongside me with some of the stuff I was trying to get into. And you have a nice looking website. You have a lot of cool materials on the website that look very professional, more professional than some of my materials. So can you tell me a little bit about nutrition for performance?
Absolutely. So Nate, another dietitian that you reached out to, we work together. We're a team. And we both started together at Florida International University, FIU, and we came up with this company because what we noticed is that we want to help people be their best and perform at their best. And that takes a team of people. That's never just one person, right? And the cool thing is that Nate actually used to run a meal prep company up in Tampa, or in Boston. So he knows how to make like quick and efficient meals. And since I worked in pro sports, I know all about supplements, about fueling. So we complement each other.
Yeah.
I'm not an amazing cook. I know how to cook, but he does a way better job. And I'll say that 100%. Right? So we complement each other. So when we take on clients and someone might have a question about one or the other, we kind of help our clients understand that. And then to that next level, know that there's certain things we don't do because we're not the expert. So when it comes to movement, or if someone's rehabbing, we'd send them to someone else because that's not our expertise when it comes to the things. We are experts in nutrition. So we want to help people perform at their best and be at their best, because we see a lot of people going to the gym and just going to lose the weight and not perform at their best. And if they start to change that mentality to perform at their best, weight loss goal will come right in tune with it.
Yeah, right. Just go above and beyond and prepare like that. So your website is Nutrition for Performance, not the number 4, but the word 4, correct?
Yeah, it's nutritionfp.com.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Don't listen to me, everyone. Nutritionfp.com, which is good because it's shorter. Less opportunities to spell it wrong, especially in Miami where there's a lot of languages being spoke. And then your social media. Your social media is very fun to watch. You post a lot, and you've mastered all the little social, like, I don't know, you do like the boomerangs when you need to.
Yeah.
You have that guy that watches people pee. That sounds weird.
Captain Hydrate.
Captain Hydrate hiding in the shower. You guys got to see this. It's funny. So Captain Hydrate, he makes sure that you're hydrated. And what's your Instagram? What's your Instagram handle?
Coach_Tony Castillo. CASTILLO.
At Coach Tony Castillo.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think hydration is such an easy, low-hanging fruit for most people. So that's where I start off at. And the reason is because if we look at it, if I had a piece of beef jerky in this hand and I had a piece of fresh steak in this hand, it's easier to tear beef jerky than it is to tear fresh steak. And the reason is because it's dehydrated meat, and that dehydrated meat just looks like your muscle. So if you're going into a workout being dehydrated, you have a higher chance of ripping that muscle, and then you're not going to be going anywhere quick, and your goal is going to be put in the back burner because you're just trying to rehabilitate.
Okay, yeah, that's a great example. You're like the king of examples. This is excellent.
Well, thanks, I try.
The house one was really good. Like when you started mentioning it, I'm like, oh, I know where he's going with this. This is cool. And here's a bonus question that's totally out of nowhere, and I should just end the episode, but I'm selfish, and this relates to me. So you're gonna I'm keeping you here for the next 1 minute.
Yeah.
I, for example, and a lot of people, when I work out, I get massive cramping afterwards. And sometimes I'm like thinking, like, especially after biceps and triceps days, like it's crazy. Like I can't even wash my hair for more than 3 seconds. And I'm wondering, I've heard a couple explanations, and it makes sense that it would just be water loss. But then I also hear about things like salt loss, or I'm blanking on the word, electrolyte loss. So I'm wondering, like, how does it get to the point where I can't even, like, do this for 2 seconds? And it seems to be a big problem with me. After I do legs, if I'm, like, eating dinner out with someone, like, I'll get a cramp so bad, I have to straighten my leg out and do this, and everyone looks, and it's so crazy. And I'm like, why does this seem to be me more than most people? And I hear things like, oh, he's a salty sweater. He's like...
Yep.
And then I think I'm like LeBron James, and then that becomes an issue, because he gets cramps.
Well, when you post this on YouTube, the great people will see it.
Yes, please. I can explain it in vivid detail, too. Or I guess you will.
All right. So, well, we can explain it together.
Okay, cool.
On my whiteboard, we see a line, and we see Na on one side, and we see K on the other. Mm-hmm. Na standing for sodium, K standing for potassium. So this is the sodium-potassium channel that's in your muscles. So what happens is when we sweat, we tend to lose sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride. Those are the 4 electrolytes we typically lose. So typically a cramp can be caused because of hydration, because of electrolytes, or it could be neural. So something going on in your nervous system. So what we try to do as dietitians is mix out hydration and sodium and electrolyte loss. So what happens is a lot of people are like, hey, Tony, I love drinking coconut water because it's an electrolyte-filled drink. Let's talk about coconut water for a second. Oh, and Body Armor. Both of them are very high in potassium. So if this is a channel where we try to keep it balanced and we give it a lot of potassium, does this look balanced right now?
No.
No. So what happens is the potassium actually takes the sodium and excretes it out. And now we have just one side of potassium and no sodium. So it actually dehydrates you. So coconut water and Body Armor actually dehydrate you and they don't hydrate you. Those are two products I typically do not recommend because they're high in potassium.
Wow. Is that because the extra electrolytes in there create like a solution which takes water in? Like the extra K, the extra potassium is taking water in like that?
Whatever sodium you have, it'll take it out. And yes, as we know, potassium is a diuretic. So it'll also make you urinate more and it will attach to the sodium and take it out.
Yeah, because the sodium exists within the muscles. You're sucking out the stuff that's helping with contraction. So then what would be the recommendation for those people, let's say that your name's Rob and you're selfishly asking this question on the podcast. Like is just drinking like a little salty, like I've heard of this like salty fake Gatorade solution you can make at home, like water with a little bit of salt and maybe even a little bit of sugar just to make it taste not like crap. Is that really the big thing, is just getting more sodium, or would that create an imbalance on the other side?
No. So because sodium is the one we typically sweat out the most, I typically recommend adding salt to your food, or you can get a low-calorie sports drink and just have that before your workouts. And that's typically what I recommend.
Wow.
Just a low-sugar sports drink, typically like a zero-calorie one because you don't really need it. Or you can get one with a little bit of carbohydrates. And the reason you want the carbohydrates is because it helps the absorption of the water through your gut. So that's why carbohydrates are typically in those sports drinks. Now, if you're doing over 90 minutes of continuous activity, then you should have the full sugar sports drink. If it's anything under 90 minutes, you can do like the lower calorie ones.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I think for the average person, since we're not all super athletes, would be considering starting with the lower calorie sports drinks and then potentially moving up if they need to. That's really interesting, yeah, because I've always had issues with cramping like that, and I think it's more than other people. I remember after a football game once, in the bus, we had to stand up, and my legs were like fused. Hips at 90, knees at 90, and I like fell out of the chair, and I was like, what is going on? But I never drank water during practice, and all we had was water, and I came to a point where I felt like it's like I had this like deep urge to get like something different than water. So obviously Gatorade was an option, and I think that did help. But yeah, and I sweat a lot, so I'm very sweaty. I'm probably sweating out a lot more than I think I am, and that's the thing people have to keep tabs on as well.
Yeah, and so we think about salty sweaters, so we think about those electrolytes. And so we do water, we do electrolytes, and then if both of those seem not to work, there's these, like people do like pickle juice, like a shot of pickle juice.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
So it's got a lot of sodium, but it also helps activate like the neural pathway tongue. It seems like a shock. So it kind of sends like a shock wave, so it kind of can also stop the cramp. And there's a product that I'm not sponsored by, but they're called Hot Shot, and it supposedly tastes like Fireball. And it does the same thing. And the studies they've done have seen that it helps stop cramping, but that's due to it's the same neural pathway. So it kind of gives that body the shock. So that's why I never say it's just water loss or electrolyte loss. It could be one of the three. So what we do is try to X out the both. So for Rob that was asking, I would recommend trying out a low sugar sports drink before his workout to see if that helps.
Yeah, for these individuals that need the help. And not me, but maybe
no,
people...
No. The person asking.
Yeah, I'm a physical therapist. I got everything in line. Everything's perfect, man. I would never make these mistakes myself. All right, so nutritionfp.com. It was nice. It was really nice talking to you. You're extremely... I'm telling you, the examples and the charisma is just off the charts here. This is what we need more of, okay? So I would love to have you out in the future. Maybe at some point we can get a little bit more granular with certain things too. But this was full of information, and you're really good at articulating it because I think a lot of people need to hear these three things. I picked the three things that I feel like just came to me the most. And that's what you suggested. Intermittent fasting, keto, and protein consumption. So.
Oh, gotcha. The three things. Yeah.
I thought you were making me review it like earlier. I was like, oh, I'm learning. Okay. Yeah. I can't hear people remember. And
these are the three things you need to remember.
Yeah, you're so good at framing things. It's great.
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks,
Coach.
man. Appreciate it.
All right, Coach Tony Castillo. So if everyone wants to reach out to, I say go on their website. If you go on their website, it's a nice little journey and it's really nice looking. I actually asked them how they made it. because I myself, my website is okay for like constructing
Work
on
in
your own.
progress.
Oh, it's still getting better. This is amazing. So, oh yeah, I'm a work in progress for sure. I need to hire some
We all are.
developers.
We all are.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. HealthCast 305, episode 7, I believe, with Coach Tony Castillo. Thank you very much for coming on, and I look forward to speaking with you more in the future, okay?
Same. Thanks, Rob.
Adios.